Hello everyone, happy Sunday. How's your day going? Wanted to check in with you. And something came through in one of the coaching sessions that I had last week, I believe it was, and wanted to share with you beautiful souls this insight that I had. So there's a big difference between feeling your feels. Happy Sunday, unleashing your strengths. Thanks for tuning in. So there's a big difference between feeling your feels and being attached to the thoughts and spiraling down. And this has been an ongoing process for me, is trying to be aware of the difference between the two. Because as you all know, I'm the queen of feeling my feels. But at the end of the day, if we look at that and we dissect it, our thoughts are what creates intense feelings in our body. And the more that we feel something, the more that we think similar thoughts. And then that becomes, again, another feeling, and then eventually becomes a strong emotion. And when we have strong emotion and we don't allow space to really feel that feeling, we get attached to it, and it's this vicious cycle. So have you ever caught yourself, maybe somebody said something to you and you get triggered, right? So somebody says something, you get triggered, and you have this feeling, and you're like, okay, I'm going to feel this feel, right? That's intellectualizing the process. So you're going to feel this feel, and then you start feeling it, and then you get another thought like, oh, remember when that person did that? And then it enhanced that feeling that you already had, vice versa, vice versa, vice versa. And it's like this cycle that starts, and then you can't stop, and then you start spiraling out of control. And this could last for minutes, it could last for hours, it could even run into your next day, or it could be like 6 months or years after, and you're still feeling the same emotion with the same trigger. So that being said, it's really important to know the difference between our attachment to the thought versus actually feeling our feels. So let's dive a little more deeper into that, so that we can really know the difference and start building that awareness behind it. So what does it mean to actually feel your feels? So no matter where we are in our life, we're going to be triggered by something, right? This is what's called the collective healing. And we heal by getting triggered. And then when we get triggered, it's what we do with that trigger, right? That creates that healing. Or we can either face it and feel it and transcend it, or we stuff it down and we're not quite ready. And then it will continue to be triggered until we release that. But if we don't choose to release it, currently what happens is that feeling inside of you will amplify, right? So the more that we suppress and we get triggered by different people, different situations, that's going to grow inside of your body. And at the end of the day, that's what causes intense emotion, and our body starts to really break down on an energy. So it starts with the energy first, and then our body reacts to that and it starts breaking down, and then that actually turns into physical disease and all these other things, like, right, autoimmune disorders, all that fun stuff. And then eventually we can get really intense illnesses. But it really starts with understanding how to feel our feels and not be attached to the feeling and recreating it like a hot spiral mess. Okay, so feeling your feels. Let's say you have a trigger and you're feeling something. Instead of kind of intellectualizing it and saying, holy crap, I'm feeling XYZ. A practice that works for me is when I get triggered, I initially take a breath. I get triggered and I start asking myself, okay, why did I get triggered? And if I don't know and I can't connect the dots, I go back into my body and I ask myself, where do I feel the pain in my body? So as I'm breathing, I'm starting to get out of my head and into my body. So let's say somebody said something that triggered something and I could feel it in my gut and it doesn't feel very nice, so like right in here. So then I get that intense feeling inside of my body, and instead of these thoughts that will recreate that feeling, that gut feeling that you have that hurts, and then you start thinking other thoughts like it, and it amplifies, and you start feeling sick to your stomach for the whole day. What you can do is you can start breathing. You can start breathing in through the nose, and you can count to 4, let's say. That's another technique, is so breathe in and breathe out for 4. So keep breathing and feel the pain that you're feeling in that space. That's all you need to do. And when you do that, you start getting out of your head and more into your body. You're not trying to fix anything. You're not trying to understand it. You're simply just being a presence for that feeling and giving it a home, giving it a space without overanalyzing, overthinking about it. So try that and see how it works for you. But this is kind of something that's worked for me. And then once I become present, right? Because becoming present is what helped me observe my feeling and allow my body just to experience it instead of attaching myself to it. But you have to become the observer. And the only way to become the observer is if we become present. And the only way to become present is if we breathe through the process and start feeling it in our body so we can get out of here, get out of our heads. Okay? So I hope that was a good way of explaining it. I'm still learning how to express what it is I am teaching in a very simple form, right? And so that's a way to start feeling your feels. And if that's not working, the breathing, another technique I do is, for example, let's say you're feeling that pain in the gut, you got triggered, you're starting to get this feeling in your body. You can create movement. So there's different stretches and different movements that you can do based on where you're feeling it in your body. And this could be very intuitive, or you can look it up on Google from an expert, whatever it is you want to do. But for example, I like to do cobra. So when I'm feeling, right, because right here, when you think about this is your personal power right in here when we look at chakras. But we don't need to know that. You could just be like, whatever that person said triggered the crap out of me, and I'm feeling it right in my gut. And then so instead of reacting and starting to like think more thoughts like it, and then you start amplifying it and become addicted to that thought, which recreates more feelings inside of your body, and then it never really gets released or transcended. What we can do is we can do, for example, cobra as a yoga pose. So you go on the ground and you do a little bit of cobra. You can look it up yourself, and you breathe as you're moving the energy out of your body. So that's another technique as well. So to summarize feeling your feelings, we have to get out of here and start feeling into here, right? Feeling into our body. That's all we need to do is a beautiful step in the right direction. And another way as well is one of my clients, we were doing Reiki the one day, and she started just like crying, and it was a beautiful release for her. And she's like, I don't really know why I was crying. I just started crying and I had to release something. And she's like, but it was very beautiful. It wasn't like I was in my head about it. It was like my body literally releasing. And that is what feeling your feelings looks like. It's going to be a certain type of release energetically. And so she started meditating every single day. And in her meditations, that's what happens is she'll start like crying. And that's your body releasing. It's releasing the pain that you have from those trigger. Rather that's one trigger or it's a constant trigger that recreates that feeling inside of your body. So that's one way of doing it. And then once you start embodying the emotion, what happens is we start connecting the dots, but we're not trying to fix them and trying to understand them. What we do is we connect to our intuition, and we start realizing, oh my goodness, when that person said that, that reminds me of when I was a child and my mother never made me feel good enough, let's say. So we will organically start connecting the dots. And sometimes this is very hard to do on our own. And that's what I do in Inner Beauty Coaching, is that I help you connect the dots so that when you get triggered, it always has to do it most of the time with something that happened in the past, most likely stem from childhood, right? So I don't like to hit our head up against the wall and deal with our pain head on. That's not my style. I'm more gentle and like to do this intuitive self-care work so that we can elevate our energy. And then so when we do get triggered, we can have the tools, right, to embody the emotion instead of getting addicted to it, right? Because some of us live in anger. I know for me, I've been in anger and resentment for so many years because I wasn't dealing with my stuff. I would suppress it all. Or I didn't know how I was feeling and I was trying to intellectualizing it and being like, well, I feel like this because X, Y, Z. And then that thought would amplify and create more feelings, which create a stronger emotion in my body. It was a shit show, right? So then I started just like crying. I remember sometimes I was crying for like hours and I'm like, I felt like I was losing my mind. But that was embodying the emotion, is I had to release it somehow. And the more you release, the less you'll get triggered. And the more that you release, you will kind of have a bird's eye view and understand why you're releasing. And the more that you understand, and you understand on an organic level and you start connecting the dots, instead of trying to fix it and understand it first, Because that's our ego. That's our ego trying to fix and wanting to know exactly what's happening and why you got triggered and all these things. It's like motivation, right? Nothing wrong with that. But what happens is it gets us back up here. And our body, we need to embody the emotion to truly feel it and transcend it. And I promise you, you will end up connecting the dots. Rather that's with a coach or a friend or a professional, whatever it may be. So that is, to sum it up, what feeling your feelings looks like and embodying it. Versus your attachment to thoughts. I kind of already explained that. I'm just going through my notes here. But pretty much the thought creates emotion in the body, and then it creates more thoughts, and this is a vicious cycle. We've already talked about this. So the reason why it doesn't go away, because it stays stuck in your body. And it stays stuck because we haven't fully released it. So the universe is going to give us different opportunities to release this trigger. But let's say our pain, let's say a situation happened, okay? And the situation is like a big ball of fire, let's say. And we get triggered by something, by a certain situation or someone, and it's part of this ball. And so we decide to embody the feeling, right? And actually feel it and let it go in the moment, instead of attaching ourselves and spiraling and just making a hot mess out of it. And so then we transcend that piece of the puzzle, and the ball gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So healing doesn't happen instantaneously. It's an ongoing process. But when we're dealing with a specific thing, depending on how much pain, how much resistance, and how long you've held on to it for, we're going to have to get triggered by different people, different situations in order to transcend it. But it's going to happen in little chunks and little pieces. And then one day you're going to wake up and you're going to have somebody that says something that used to trigger you, and it's not going to trigger you anymore. And that's when you know you've healed from it. And this is where me and my partner really dove deep on one Friday night a few months ago. And my partner's been through a lot in his life, and I don't want to unravel what's happened. That's his story to tell. But dealing a lot with grief, and went to therapy when he was young, and it was just a really intense time in his life. And I asked him, I said, how did you deal with such an intense trauma? And he explained that he had to talk about it over and over and over again until he was able to feel his feels and cry or get angry. There's different stages to feeling our feels, right? So there's no right or wrong way of doing this, but we need to honor all of our emotions, right? And if we skip a step, which people think we skip a step with Inner Beauty by doing intuitive self-care, that is not what we do with Inner Beauty and the self-care that we do. We only do that to elevate our energy, build the foundation so that we can have the stamina to withstand the triggers and know how to move through them. So we don't react. We're human. We're always going to react, but it's an ongoing process. But we can choose to observe what's going on and not react in the moment and be addicted to, our thoughts and react out of ego, right? So going back to my partner, kept talking about it so that he could feel, and eventually within a few years, like he gets triggered in different ways about it, but he knows it heals when he can share the story. He knows he's healed when, he can share it and he doesn't get mad anymore, or he doesn't get resentful, or he doesn't get sad about it. That doesn't mean we will never get sad about it again, but there's a difference between having that situation take over you versus, how to explain that? He said it so beautifully when we chatted the other day, where it takes over you because it's almost like you're at the bottom of a mountain. I'm going to explain my own words. And you're looking at the top. And that is maybe how we're dealing with our trauma. And we're going, oh my God, there's no way I can climb this mountain. And no one can do that. Those are quantum leaps, right? So by dealing with it and talking about it, you're going to start getting triggered in different ways. And you're going to be able to address those triggers and feel your feels as you go. And that's these little baby steps that you take to climb up the mountain. And then one day you'll be at the mountain, and what used to trigger you, so what used to trigger my partner doesn't trigger him anymore. So when people ask him about it, he can talk about it, where before he couldn't talk about it at all, right? Doesn't mean you're not sad anymore about it. Doesn't mean you don't miss, certain people if you're going through the grieving process. It's not my expertise. I'm just sharing from my partner's experience. Or whatever it may be. I mean, there's so many different things that we go through in life, but it doesn't mean you forgot about the situation, it doesn't mean that you won't get emotional about it. But what it means is that it doesn't take you over and you feel like you're taking these steps towards healing. But remember, healing is not taking one step up the mountain and then it's done. So another example I want to talk about is one of my other clients who was diagnosed with PTSD from a boating accident from a professional. And it took her, I think it was 8 or 9 years, before we were able to do this work. So it took her a long time, but she was ready to face it. So we did a lot of inner work and give her a lot of tools to face this. And long story short, she was able to get back on the boat with her dad, and she was able to transcend a part of that ball that I was talking about. But she didn't do it all at once. It was all of these little pieces. And yes, she was able to overcome it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that she won't get triggered again in the future. That's where it's an ongoing process. It's not like you take a magic pill and you're healed. And that's the misinformation about this work. And specifically my work that I do is it gets misunderstood. So I'm trying to do my best to really put it into a beautiful package so that it's easier for everyone to understand what it is that we do. So long story short, there's a big difference between feeling your feels and being attached to the feeling, and you spiral down into this obsession and you end up not being able to process, and it doesn't go away because you're swimming in, or you're actually not swimming in it, you're drowning in it, right? So the only way to do this is to create space, is to become the observer. And there are many tools that we can use. And I've talked about pattern interrupts in one of the workshops that I've done with Brianna. But a pattern interrupt is a beautiful way to really create that space to become the observer, so you can allow your body to feel instead of you intellectualizing it and creating more thoughts that are similar. Because ego and fear are very strong and really like to play the victim, and really likes to make it's almost like, think of Pac-Man. It's like the Pac-Man, but the Pac-Man gets bigger and bigger the more stories it tells. So you have a certain thought that creates a feeling, and then like these little the little Pac-Man comes and starts eating more thoughts, and the Pac-Man gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and it amplifies that in your body, and you hold on to it for sometimes a long period of time. So I just wanted to hop on and share that love with you. And if you have any questions, I'm always here. And just remember that there's no wrong way of doing this. I'm just sharing from my heart and giving you tools, and whatever aligns with you, keep it, and whatever doesn't, throw it out the window. And know that your intuition trumps everything. So the more that you do this inner work and you connect with yourself, the more you're going to find the tools and the mentors and everything, the people, the situations that work for you. No one can tell you that but yourself. You are your own answer, and I've said that from the beginning. And at the end of the day, anything or anyone that helps you connect back to your home space and within you, somewhere where there's depth and there's unconditional love to face the darkness, then you can't get it wrong. You can never get it wrong. So I love you, and we will chat soon.